listening to the Debug Podcast.
Hey, you listening to the Debug Podcast.
Hey y'all, you're listening to the Debug Podcast.
All right, we're live. Thanks everyone for coming to this discussion. This is the second of a new podcast that we're launching. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
And this is sort of an ongoing conversation that's going to be themed around a particular issue that families here in San Jose that have been organizing against police violence based on their experiences are organizing around. And so the first conversation we were going to do in the top of 2024 was what police do to families after they've killed a loved one and the experiences, and then also what families here have decided they're going to embark on as a way to challenge the way police kind of add further injury on top of their lethal violence when they kill. So maybe what we could do to start is just introduce who's in the room. We're at Debug in the kitchen right now. Uki is on the ones and twos. I'm Raj, I'm with Debug. You want to introduce yourself?
My name's Chandra Jaquez, and my father, Harpo Jaquez, was killed in August of 2015.
My name's Jim Showman. My daughter, Diana Marie Showman, was killed by SJPD August 14th, 2014.
My name is Karina, and my father, Rudy Cardenas, was killed in 2004 in San Jose.
My name is Regina Cardenas, sister of Karina, and our dad was killed by DEA agents.
Thanks for coming today, and listeners should also know that this is part of a larger group of families that have been organizing to stop loved ones being killed by law enforcement. That's been happening here in San Jose for some years, and neighboring cities as well. And those families are not here physically, but certainly are here in spirit and have informed the discussion that we're going to have today. So a lot of the times that you all have spoken at rallies, at policy discussions, at City Hall, at the county building, we've been talking a lot about the events that lead up to the killing of a loved one and what police did, the lack of accountability, what happened when you try to get some accountability of police officers through the courts civilly or even through the district attorney's office. But the part of the conversation that really hasn't broken the surface and hasn't been discussed is what police do to families after they've killed. And it was something that was sort of very naturally uncovered just from the discussions that you all had with each other, sharing your own experiences. And it sort of led us to this new place that we hadn't really thought of before about interrogations of families and how they're manipulated as a way to further criminalize the person that had been killed and insulate the police from any accountability. And what we're hoping to do today was kind of talk about your experiences and how you came to that revelation, how you shared it with each other, what happened, and what y'all are looking to do moving forward. Jim, I sort of see you as the quarterback of this effort, just because you've been so vocal about what happened when your daughter was killed, and the experience. And I think it sort of launched us in a lot of different ways as families share their own experiences. But maybe you could start off talking about what happened with Diana and your experience.
Sure. Well, Diana was living with me in a duplex in South San Jose, and I happened to, I had left my wallet. It was just a Thursday morning, August 14th. And I'd left my wallet at home, and so I was going to go home at lunchtime and take Diane out to lunch. And I also had some paperwork I was going to get for her to have help. She had bipolar disorder, and we were actually getting the paperwork to deal with for further help for her. And when I showed up, this is like about a little before noon, Blossom Hill Road was blocked off. There were squad cars everywhere, and I couldn't. It was taped off, so I knew of a back alley how I could get through there. So I did that. I went around the block, came back through the back alley, and was then stopped by an officer, and he wanted to know who I was and this and that. And then he got a sergeant to take over, and they wanted to know if I knew this woman that was in this duplex. I said, yeah, it's my daughter. And what happened? Well, the cop then said, well, she came out with a weapon and she was shot. And I go, is she alive? Well, they took her to the hospital. And it was a hot day. It was August. And he goes, well, what I'd really prefer, why don't we get out of the heat? Once you get in the car, we can go down to the station. We can go over really what happened. And so in my mind, he's very calm. He's not saying that, and I'm not hearing any sirens or anything else. In my mind, I figured, well, what weapon? For one, I don't know how she would have gotten a weapon. And I'm also thinking, whatever she had, they must have wounded her. So he takes me to the squad car, and on the way there, I called my wife, said, you need to come down to the station too, and I told the cop, she's not going to be able to drive. Can you send a squad car to get her? And so he said, yeah. So then we get to the station, we go into a room. I don't even know what I'm thinking at this time. I'm flipped out. And I'm sure it was there was a glass panel. I'm sure it was an interrogation room, right? And so he goes, well, okay. He goes, I'm going to record this. Can you tell me, exactly, who you are and who your daughter was, and this went on for just a few minutes. And another plainclothes cop came in and gave him the hook. Basically said, you need to get out of here, because he wasn't authorized to do what they wanted. They wanted a detective, not a sergeant, not a rank and file guy. And so they left me in the room. And I had my cell phone. I called my boss at work and said, what had happened. And I'm probably not going to be coming back to work today. Well, the plainclothes cop came in and saw me with the phone. He said, I need to take your phone. Because this is an investigation. We don't want any, evidence tainted. I'm like, what evidence? I don't know what's going on here. We were about an hour. I was there without anybody coming in, and I got up. I wanted to use the restroom. There was a bathroom right there, and they go, oh, you can't use that one. They had a cop escort me down the hall to another place, and the cop waited outside. And then, I'm going to make a run for it or something. So we get back into the room, and by that time, Vicky had shown up, my wife. And I gave her a hug and said, come on, let's go in the room. I don't know what's going on. And they said, oh, you guys can't be together. You need to have her in a different room. And I'm like, you're kidding me. I go, well, you need to have somebody in there with her, because she's very upset. And I don't know, I was too, but anyway, I go back into the room, and then another 10, 15 minutes goes by, and I got mad at that point. I came out and said, hey, what is going on here? I've been in here for over an hour. You haven't told me what's going on with my daughter. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know what you've done to her. But, what you're doing is cruel. And if you want a statement from me, I'll give you a statement. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But I need to know now. And they, well, I'm sorry, sir, but the detectives are doing the investigation. And I go, I don't care. Get somebody else. And they said, no, we can't do that. We're short on staff. I go, I don't care. So 10 minutes goes by, and two detectives, suits, came in, with the recording. So we're going to record this. And then they asked me about Diana. I told her that she'd had issues with her bipolar disorder, and they said, could she be violent? And I was like, well, not normally, but like anybody, she would blow up and this type of thing. And anyway, they interviewed me for probably 20 minutes or so, and then when they said do you think she's capable of violent behavior? And I said, well, like all of us are. Yeah, it depends on what happened. Okay, well, that's all they needed to know. And they'd gotten enough, and I said more than I ever should have. I regret this to this day. I feel guilt because eventually what I said in that interview was used against me. But when they finally got to what they wanted from me was that, yeah, she's capable of violent behavior, they said, okay, well, I think we're done. And I go, well, what's going on with Diana? Is she alive? And they said, no, I'm sorry, she's not. And, I collapsed at that point and they didn't even talk to Vicky. I had to go in and get her and tell her. And so that information from that interview, was in the police report. Our lawyer, so what typically happens in San Jose, which has happened since Jeff Rosen has been the DA, they rubber stamp the police report and exonerate the cop. There's no wrongdoing. And so for us, the citizenry, our only recourse is to do a civil suit, in which I got a lawyer, and who eventually then, after the depositions, I wasn't even deposed, Vicky was, but when he got that information, he said, that's icing on the cake for the police. They can use this. And you go in a court of law, you never know what a jury's going to think of. You can never tell. So at that point, he just advised us to drop the lawsuit. He said it could cost us $50,000 to $100,000 in getting expert witnesses and that type of thing. But it was my interview with the police that settled the case for the city.
I think when you were sharing some of this in our regular meetings where families are talking about what happened and what we should collectively do, what was striking just to watch was the other families, when they heard their story, were nodding their head, and it felt very familiar.
Similar experiences. So anyway, I should.
Yeah. So with that, it might be helpful to hear from Karina and Regina. Different time period.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really similar techniques that the police had, even though both Regina and Karina were very young at the time too. It didn't really dissuade their strategy to extract information from the family that could be used against the person they killed to sanitize a case the way you described. But Karina and Regina, maybe we start with Karina. I don't know how much you remember and how much maybe you didn't care to remember. But can you tell us about the experience when your father was killed and what you remember about the ensuing interrogation?
For our experience, I was 18, 19 years old, and we actually were at bingo with my mom and I think my aunt, and we had just got a call that said, we think your dad was killed, but we don't know. And as soon as we got that call, we immediately left, and I think we went to the crime scene first, because people had told us where the location was, and they had it all blocked off. And this is in the evening, maybe. What time would you say?
Maybe like 6, 7.
Yeah, and so it's in the evening, and they wouldn't tell us any information. Then we went to the hospital, and they couldn't give us any information. And then from there, I don't know how it happened, but we had gotten a call from somebody from the police department. Do you remember how that happened, or how we went down there?
I don't remember getting a call from them at all. I just remember kind of word of mouth is who called us. Like somebody saw something, called somebody, got in touch with us, and I think as we were just kind of trying to piece it together, I think we just went there to try to find answers. Because it had already been like hours, I think.
Yeah, it had been hours.
We hadn't like technically heard anything from anyone except just people on the street who knew our dad, knew family or whatnot.
I think we even tried to go to the coroner's office, and they wouldn't even tell us if he was there.
Yeah, like we didn't know if he was dead, alive. We had just heard, like, you know, just hearsay from people. Like, we think your dad was shot by the cops is all we heard.
Because you never
But-
got never got an official call from law enforcement, right?
Nothing.
No.
And I think it was my dad's ex-wife's sister who called or something. That someone had called her, but I think she still didn't even have any, like, confirmation of anything. And
So you all show up as a family at the police department to try to get the basic answers.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
They separated all of us.
yeah, pretty much like Jim said, they put us each in a room, and I think did they bring out video cameras, I think, to set up for us? And, or
I
just
don't
tape
remember
recordings?
cameras, but I know that, well, they had
I
to
feel like
have
they took pictures of
something.
us.
They did take Polaroids of us. They took Polaroids of us. And then I know that they did have some sort of audio equipment, but I don't know if it was video, because I do know because they had already had it set up for the officers that they were already interrogating that day. So,
Kind of the same thing like Jim said. They wouldn't tell us anything. They wouldn't tell us if our dad was dead, alive, what happened, until they talked to us and tried to get us to say what they wanted us
So
to
you
say.
all went there as a family to get answers, but they turned the tables, interrogated you, and was trying to seek information from you, and you were all in individual rooms.
yeah, well, they had told us, if you want to know the details, you can just come in here. We'll talk to you. We'll explain it all. But it ended up being, so the two questions that stood out to me, and I'm sure they asked others, was one, if we knew of our dad dealing drugs, doing drugs, his usage of drugs. And the other question was whether or not he ever had signs of, like, depression.
They were really trying to get us to say, like, it was suicide by cop, kind of.
Yeah.
Without actually giving us information. But, like, because our dad was in prison, like, when we were younger, but he had been out for, God, years, you know? But they really wanted us, they were trying to get us to say, like, that he would never go back, that he would rather get killed than go back. They kept trying to put these, like, words in our mouth. But we were like, no, like, that's not true.
And what's interesting is they asked anybody that they came in contact with their family that knew my dad, they were asking that. And what's interesting is, like, the one person they got to say it, but they kind of like used her to, like, they built the story. Like, that story is what I think is what they did with her, because he had never said what he said. They just kind of, like, built it with her, like, the actual, like, I don't know how to say it, like, they built the story with her.
I think you're just super confused at the time and, like, kind of, I don't know, you're in this, like, surreal moment of, like, confusion, and you're trying to just kind of figure out, like, what the fuck's going on, you know? And you're trying to make sense of it, but they're, like, kind of badgering you at the same time, so it's like you can't even collect your thoughts, you know? They're just trying to manipulate what you're saying, and you're trying to just keep your head clear and figure out what's going on, but they just don't tell you.
But I think for us, what got me the most, like, now that I look back on it, it's like, what are they trying to say? Like, if you do have a mental health disorder or you are depressed, then you, like, deserve to die, because that's pretty much what they're trying to get us to say. Like, my dad had no signs of depression. Like, I've never seen my dad sad. Like, I never seen him. And it's like, with my stepmother, they were able to, like, build that, when I know 100% factually, like, it's never even a hint of that we've seen in our lives. So, like, if somebody does have that, like with Jim, like, his daughter did have, you know, bipolar disorder, it's like, and you're being honest and truthful, it's like you don't stand a chance, because then they're just like, they're like tearing you down for having anything going on. I just, now looking back, it's just like, it's just, you know, you don't even want to tell them, like, if there's anything going on with you, you know what I mean? Like,
And how-
it's,
Jim,
Yeah, it seems like they build the stories just to justify their action, and, you know, to, like you say, insulate themselves from accountability. And then especially in Santa Clara County, you know, they know they're going to get up, they get off, you know, but what they want is in any, you know, abnormality from a typical, you know, law-abiding citizen. If there's just one little nick, they're going to take that and run with it.
And how long did the interrogation last for you all?
I don't know how long it lasted. I feel like as soon as they knew we wouldn't say what they wanted, then they kind of were just like, okay, just go away. And then I think with my stepmother, it might have lasted longer because they were kind of like coaxing her like down that pathway. But yeah, it just was, you know, and then it's kind of sad too because, you know, with our dad, you know, the officers had two different testimonies of what happened, and they were questioned the same like we were. But when we actually went to trial, because they were in such distress,
yeah.
that they took the second story of what happened, not the first one.
But it's not perjury because they were just under distress. But I mean, if we do that, then
Yeah,
it's,
but
you know,
with
perjury.
the families, like, you're in total shock, and like, you know, you know, like, even though my stepmom said like, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not what had happened, then they were like, no, that's 100% factual because you said it. They don't take distress or anything like into the equation when it comes to families, you know. So
they came in with a game plan, and that game plan was to create the narrative. That this was a suicide by cop.
Yeah.
And they try to get what they could.
They try to get what they can, and they try to go with as many people that know, because I think in the testimonies of even my dad's friends, they were asking similar questions. So they really tried to just like, you know, like, I don't know, like, how do you say it, when they keep questioning you in different ways to try to
They're trying to manipulate you to say what they want.
Yeah, so they did that with everybody until one person said it.
And I think with one of our dad's friends, like, it seemed a little different in the testimonies because it seemed like, I don't know if he had like a record or something, so I feel like they were using that to kind of, I don't know, like, get people to say what they wanted, like, okay, we're gonna kind of cut you a deal or not get you in trouble or get, you know, just kind of help you out if you help us out, kind of.
Yeah, we don't know what's, and I'm wondering.
Because it seemed kind of like weird, like some of the testimonies, like how they seemed a little different, you know?
And then one of the guys didn't show up.
Yeah, which is what happened with some of the witnesses. Like, initially there were witnesses, like, from the area, and were very much, like, saying, you know, our dad didn't have a weapon, our dad, like, was no threat, and then, I don't know, they just all disappeared. Come trial time, none of them were around.
And so through this whole interrogation, at any point did they tell you your father was killed?
I think at the end.
Yeah.
After, similar to Jim's.
Yeah, the same like Jim's. Yeah.
After the extraction.
At the end.
They kind of carry it over you to try to get you to speak to them before they tell you anything.
Yeah.
Okay, and you all were so young at the time.
Yeah, we were young. I feel like because the answers were so out of character for my dad, I kind of knew that they were trying to get me to say it.
So you sensed something.
I sensed something because it was so like out of character.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, he wasn't like anyone that knew my dad. He was always so happy and he joked and he had such a
He was just, like, super goofy and, like,
charismatic.
yeah, super, like, just kind of just talk shit to you all the time, joked around, like, just, you know.
So the questions were so left field that it's almost like, you know, something's going on. Like, why are they asking me this? But you don't really know because you've never been in that situation.
Right.
And like how Jim said, they're kind of just so kind of calm about it. You don't think that they're dead. Like, you think like they're...
I mean, they're very calculated on what they're doing to you and how they're doing it. This is their MO, you know, this is what they do, time and time and again.
Yeah.
I think later on in the conversation too, where you all found out that there was an actual trained methodology that they had, a playbook, so to speak, that they're running with all the families.
Yeah.
Chandra, maybe you could share about your experience, because it was a little bit different with you, but would be curious for you to share about your experience in terms of your father's killing, and then also what the police were trying to do with you and your response.
Yeah. So mine was different than theirs because I didn't go down to the police station. At the scene, my mom was there and a couple other family members were already there, which is how I heard and found out. So I went to the scene and everything was already taped off. It was probably like 7 o'clock at night when all of this kind of happened. And basically I was just being stubborn and was like, I'm not going anywhere unless if my dad's here, I'm here. If he goes somewhere, then obviously, it's a different story. But the whole time, we didn't really know what happened. We just knew he was shot by a cop. So immediately, I asked, like, well, what did he do? And everyone just said, I don't know. We don't know. We have no idea. So it was kind of weird that night. And I stayed out there until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember exactly, but it was super late. And basically none of the cops really said anything to us until a couple hours into it. Came up to me and my mom, and they said, you guys can come down to the station and, same thing, like you guys get answers and stuff like that. And I said, no, if he's here, I'm here. And they said, well, it's not like he's going anywhere. So I was like, wow. So that was just that night. That was the only kind of interaction I had. I kind of just stayed in my corner with my mom and just kind of observed everything that was going on. And then once they took my dad, then we're like, okay. So we went home. Obviously, we couldn't sleep, but, everyone's at my mom's house. About 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning when the news comes on, that's when everyone kind of started, like, freaking out because the news was trying to say he had kidnapped his girlfriend, which she told me that was a complete lie. She picked him up, so it's kind of crazy. And then they redacted that statement, said he had a gun, he reached for his waistband. Actually, no, he didn't. He was going to kill his girlfriend. So it was just a whole bunch of lies within the news within that first day.
They put out sort of a press conference statement, making those allegations, and
Yeah.
had to retract it like the next day.
Yeah. So it was just like, whoa, what the hell? Like, because what they're saying, we are believing because we have no idea. And then they change it and change it and change it. And we're like, okay, this is weird. Like, nothing makes sense. The girlfriend saying that what they're saying is a lie. So we still had no idea. So we actually went to the cul-de-sac that my aunt lived at, which is where my dad was shot. And me and my mom actually knocked on the neighbors' doors and asked, do you guys see what happened? You guys have video? Anything. Only one neighbor talked to us, and she said that the officers already took the drive from the recording or something like that. Where is that now? We have no idea. But that would show literally everything that had happened in that court, in the cul-de-sac. But other than that, I mean, we had no idea until we went to trial exactly what happened, or we know more from the trial of what really happened. So, and I'm pretty sure they're still lying, so.
Right. Yeah, and revelations came out in trial that he wasn't armed.
He was not armed. He was shot through his backside. So everything the cop said for a reason why he killed him makes no logic sense. He just pretty much did it just because.
Which is similar to your father, Regina Queen, that the claim of suicide by cop, but the bullet trajectory was in the back as he was. Yeah. And he similarly was not armed. So you all meet at Debug on a regular basis and see how to support each other and work on policies that can prevent from these tragedies from happening to others. This particular piece of the story of the interrogations and the manipulations after the fact, when you all started seeing a through line with all of your loved ones' cases, what was that like for you? What did you find, and what did make you want to do?
I think for me, because we were like in 2004, and then hearing the stories from like the families now, especially like with Jim's story, you're just like, that is exactly what we went through. And then hearing the podcast that Jim just did, that made me like so angry. Like I had to like stop it because I was like, it was all just like I always thought they had a hidden playbook, right? You're like, they have a hidden playbook because it's too coincidental. And then hearing the podcast that Jim did, and you're like, wow, like there is a hidden playbook, you know, like this whole time we just know it. And I'm sure there's even deeper hidden playbooks from when they get to that crime scene.
Well, and they're taking advantage. You know, we were all in this state. All of us have the same experience that we've never experienced before. We don't know what's going on. We just want information, and we're all in a state of mind that I've never been or will be since, I hope. And they prey upon that and your uncertainties, and the fact that it is a strategy to get this information, before you actually come to your senses and actually understand what you're saying.
And what I remember, one of the things that came about, we're going to talk about a piece of legislation that you all are looking to introduce, but I remember one of the conversations that kind of naturally bubbled up was sharing, oh, I wish I knew, and talking about the kind of things that you wish you knew, that the only way you would know is having gone through the tragedy, which is the great irony of that. But you all came up with something called the first 24 of what families should know in the event that the police kill or seriously injure a loved one, that was based on the experience that you went through. Can you share a little bit about what were some of the things that you thought were important for other families to know if they ever find themselves in the same shoes you were in?
Well, certainly for me, it's almost like what we were probably going to get to, Miranda. The fact is, growing up, I had no involvement with law enforcement. My kids had minor, like firecrackers, whatever. And so, and Diana actually had issues a couple of times with the sheriff department, and they were actually helpful in these episodes, while she was growing up when she had issues. And so in your mind, you're thinking, at least in my mind, it's like, okay, the cops, they're here to help, right? They're our civil servants. So the first thing was just like, I can't believe I said what I said, how much information I gave them. And the first thing I would just like, I'm not going to speak to an officer about anything unless I have counsel, because it will, and they strategically use it against you in a court of law.
What were other things that?
I think like one of the big things is just to start documenting as much as you can just from the beginning, because if you're not documenting, it's only their word, like you have to document everything, because even with the interrogations that we have, I've never seen it. They were able to use it, but they never showed it to anyone. So where is it? I mean, they had a transcript, but they were making the transcripts. So it's just interesting because with the SB 1421, everything that we got was stuff they wanted us to get, not stuff that we know is out there. So it's just, you got to document everything from the beginning. Even if you have really good experiences with law enforcement, this is different. It's completely different. From the moment the incident happens, it's you versus them, and they are the ones that do that. Even with the district attorney, they're not trying to help you. You're not a victim in their eyes. So you don't have anybody that you would normally have in a homicide there to help you. It's completely different. And I don't think people realize that until it happens to you, or you hear, our stories, how differently it is than if your loved one is killed in, Santa Clara County in a homicide. It's completely different.
So I know it's not our county, and I apologize, I can't remember the family's name, but we met them in SAC. And I remember the dad was saying, his dad, I think, was a captain for like, was it Alameda County? For, I mean, years and years and years. So when his son, the captain's grandson, was killed, then all of those like relationships, everything kind of changed. And it became kind of them versus them now at this point. When all these years, he was like a captain in law enforcement. And then it just changed once they were on the other side of it.
Right.
So all those relationships were just like kind of squashed.
Wow. And the other thing that came by actually in some of the journalists, investigative journalists that covered your stories, was that it turned out there was a playbook. There was actually a firm that developed this interrogation methodology intent to extract information from families in order to then influence and the potential criminal charges against the officer or the civil case. Can you share about what that was about, if you remember? And
Well, yeah, there's a company called Lexipol, and they write manuals. You know, they are a contractor for law enforcement for various agencies and nationwide. Mostly, I understand, centered in California. But, and I understand now San Jose is no longer a client, but they were. But it's still a strategy, and it's really not only to protect the cops, it's to protect the municipalities from a lawsuit. Because, like, once again, when the district attorney rubber stamps it or just says, oh, the cop was justified in taking life, and then your only recourse again is civil suit. So then you go into court, now they have this information, and it'll be used against you. And in my case, yeah, my lawyer just said, you know, recommended we just drop the lawsuit.
yeah, it's amazing listening, because some of the investigative journalists went into Lexipol trainings and recorded what they're hearing, and I mean, it was the most disgusting stuff to actually have to hear, where all the instincts that you were already, your intuition was telling you was going on, those internal alarms, there actually was an invested, planned, trained process that cops and law enforcement go to these trainings and get taught, even in simulations, like how to interview the wife or husband, and what questions to ask to get them to say something negative that they could use.
It's inhumane. It really is.
And this is like must be a multi-million-dollar firm now or something like that. Like,
no doubt. Yeah.
and so that sort of arrived us to what you all are doing in terms of trying to stop this and change it, at least in California. So you all did the First 24, which is a pamphlet you give out to educate the public about what to do if they ever find themselves in a similar situation. But the other thing that you are looking to do is to actually change the law so that law enforcement will no longer be allowed to manipulate families. And we actually have a copy of it. I don't know if do you want to maybe describe what you're thinking and what it would do, and then maybe if someone wants to read, there's only a few bullet points, but it's brilliant. I mean, the saddest thing is that this even has to be, that this doesn't exist already. But this might be the loophole you are closing so it doesn't happen to other families. But do you want to describe about what you're looking to do?
Well, you know, if anybody watches TV, you know, everyone knows what Miranda is. You know, on TV shows, they always show the cops when it's a criminal investigation to someone who's suspected of a crime, that they are given the legal rights to a counsel before they speak to a police officer. And so what this is trying to approach that similar position. And so in our case, we're not criminals. Our family, members were killed unjustly, and yet we aren't afforded the same rights that criminal under investigation is afforded. And so what we were kind of looking forward is a Miranda, similar to Miranda, that the police should advise us before we say anything, that what we say can and will be used against us in a court of law.
And so you all it looks like we're about to get into the next legislative cycle. You are looking to see if there's a legislator that would author the bill. Are you calling this initiative anything? Like, does it have a name? It's like a Miranda rights for families, or
Kind of just like,
work in progress.
yeah, it's a work in progress, but it's kind of just like the family's Bill of Rights is kind of what we call it internally.
Sure, yeah, and now
Yeah.
externally.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you mind reading? It's a short description, but I thought it just boils it down to such a poignant, clear call. I don't know who feels like reading it, but maybe someone could read the bullet point, and then someone else could do the bullet points.
All right, I'll start it, I guess. Families who lost loved ones to police violence have been interrogated, lied to, and manipulated by police within hours, sometimes minutes, after their loved ones have been harmed. This language comes from their experience. This is read prior to any interview, questioning, or interrogation by law enforcement, regardless of whether they are in or out of the police station.
You have the right, this is what our bullet points are. You have the right to know the status of your loved one prior to answering any questions. You are not being detained. You may leave at any time. You are not required to be taken to the police station.
And then we have, you do not have to talk to the police, and you have the right to remain silent. The next one is, anything you say can be used as evidence in civil or criminal court. The next one is, you have the right to refuse to be recorded or photographed or to be searched. The last one we have is, before speaking with law enforcement, you can consult with a trusted support person, civil attorney, or legal advocate with you before and while you speak.
It seems really solid, and again, like I think the discussion we're having before was like, these aren't even really introduction to new rights that don't exist. It's just re-articulating and emphasizing rights that should be there, but no one assumes that they're going to be targeted by law enforcement given that context and vulnerable position. But Karina?
I think what's interesting is sometimes people try to make us out to be like extremists or like anti-police or whatever the case is, but we're just asking to be treated fairly. You know, from the beginning, like, we want to be treated like humans. We deserve the same courtesy. We don't deserve to be treated inhumanely. And even during the criminal investigations, like, from that they're building, it's never fair. And that's all families want. So I just think it's crazy that we even have to ask for this.
With what Karina said, I mean, this is such a minuscule ask, in my opinion. Like, it's not even, it's just something that should be happening. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing far-fetched. It's just simple things that you're asking for, just to be treated fairly. Yeah. And I mean, with our case, I mean, we felt, my sister, you know, had them following her. These officers, you know, I was getting emails from people at the DOJ saying, your dad got what he deserved. Like, it's just...
From the DOJ.
From the DOJ. Like, I traced the email back to, like, a DOJ person. It's just crazy that you're dealing with all that on top of, you know, your loved one being killed. And they're treating you like criminals when you haven't done anything wrong. You're literally just trying to find answers.
I don't have anything. I have much more to add to that.
I did have something else to say, too. With that, going off of what my sister said about us having to deal with everything on top of your loved one being killed, but maybe this is for another podcast, but we also have to deal with the other unhidden thing that the police do after your loved one's killed. They slander them through the media. So I'm sure that's a whole nother podcast, but I'm sure they have a playbook on that as well.
We're not able to find out answers, like, right after something like this happens, but they're able to put out these press releases and such, slandering them, but we can't find out just, hey, are they alive? Are they dead?
Yeah, I feel like that's funny because it's like they're so hypocritical because they say you can't answer anything because it's an investigation, but we're gonna let the public know what we want them to know. So it's kind of ridiculous in that sense.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this seems like a really critical first step to even arriving at some new understanding of transparency and accountability. Mm-hmm. And I was sort of in the same boat. I'm surprised this didn't exist before, but then when you realize, police have such an invested interest to protect their own, both for financial reasons and because of their thin blue line, or I guess thick blue line, it requires a confrontation of how the law is being manipulated. So I think this is an incredible start, and even if there's pushback, it seems just indefensible what police are doing. So hopefully folks that listen to this podcast could maybe reach out, see how they could support as this thing gets more traction. I know you all have been shopping around the idea with some legislators that have been helpful and supportive in the past, and hopefully this will catch fire. And we're in this climate now, which is sort of like the pendulum has swung after the George Floyd murder, where there's a strong political gravity around protecting law enforcement and their budgets and defending their actions. But you all as a force, like as a movement, have been undeterred, and this seems like something that could swing us back into something about respecting the rights of the victims that don't get talked about a lot, which is the families and loved ones that have to survive the passing of their loved one. Jim, you had...
Oh, no, just to add, like when they use the media against us, and again, that's could be a subject of another podcast, but ironically, 5 days before Diana was killed, Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, I mean, that's a more famous case. He was killed 5 days before, and a Mercury News columnist wrote an article and comparing the two cases and talking about insensitivity, that how San Jose is not Ferguson. Like, it was justified here in San Jose, we're good. Ferguson, bad. And I've had other people, like when we filed our lawsuit, I got a snarky response from NBC, anchor guy, like rolling his eyes that it's the anniversary of Diana's death, we're filing a lawsuit. It's like, well, that's because that's the only recourse we had to get justice here. And I think that's all we're really looking for, is to be treated like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just say you all have displayed such courage in tremendous adversity and intimidation. And for y'all to take this courageous step for others, not even just for yourselves, speaks volumes about your character. As much as the strategies and techniques they've used for manipulating families speaks to their character and lack of honor and lack of virtue, that you are literally looking to change the course of history in California to prevent the deaths of others, but also to preserve the rights of justice and accountability for the families left behind is incredibly admirable. So hopefully we'll get that done in 2024. Any final thoughts before we stop recording?
No, just always thanks for your support. And prior to meeting you guys, Vicky and I didn't have anybody to go to, and so now at least the families, we support one another, and when there is a shooting, we are usually the first ones there to help the family, at least let them know, that there is support for them.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch. So thank you for what you're doing.